And let's get to that. When last we met, if this is the first time you've seen us since the holiday, but certainly at the end of last year, we know that the Prime Minister was in a world of trouble. He, of course, had the Minister for Freebies, and she was on the ropes, her own spending, as well as several other members using other people's money to live the high life. We also know that the Prime Minister, well, didn't do well when it came to Bondi, and it felt like it was a major stain on the Prime Ministership many months after winning so handsomely at the last election. And then there's, of course, the economy, where just last week, inflation now goes to almost 4%. Remember, the band it's supposed to sit in is between 2 and 3%. For it to be hitting up towards 3.8, close to 4%, means there's a very good chance there's about to be a rate rise. Now, remember, one of the reasons why this government was able to get back in the game at the start of last year, before the election, was when the very same meeting 12 months ago cut interest rates. 12 months later, it is about to, presumably, increase them. It is going to be a very difficult week. And it should still be a difficult week for the Prime Minister, but, of course, the action is on the other side of the Parliament. The behaviour of the leadership of both the Liberal and National Party and its members has given essentially a free kick to the Prime Minister. You all know the details. But this is kind of like the hokey pokey, right? You put your MPs in, you put your shadow ministers out, and all of it gets the Prime Minister to a place where he is now so confident as he starts this parliamentary year officially tomorrow that he was at the tennis on the weekend. He completely avoided it in 2025 because he knew it was a bad look going into an election. He knew it was a particularly bad look this year after the Annika Wells of it all. But no, there he was on Saturday cheering on the semi-finalists making it towards tonight's final. But of course, the difficulty of the coalition not being a coalition anymore is that there are going to be major changes when you see Parliament sit this week. Now, unless something is miraculously going to happen, and there is no indication of that taking place, you are going to have Sussan Ley and the Liberals behind her, but then the National Party will be nowhere on the opposition front benches. Instead, they will be down into teal territory. The opposition split doubles the size of the crossbench from 14 to 28 people. Equal that to the number of Liberal MPs, and it will necessitate changes in the chamber, where the Liberals and Nationals have sat together for decades. A draft plan is expected to propose that the Liberal assistant ministers move to fill the gaps on the front bench. So it's not even going to be the starting 11 or starting 15 or starting 13, depending on what particular sport that you like here, or starting 15, if you like that form of football. Instead, there'll be a couple of Liberal backbenchers. They'll sit in behind Sussan Ley because they'll be the ones nodding on television. Then there's going to be a little bit of a break, and then you're going to start to see, well, again, the crossbench. Everything from the scenario where you've got Barnaby Joyce, used to be, late last year, the Nationals MP, now the One Nation sole lower house MP, along with the Teals, along with Katter, along with Wilkie, and along with the rest of the Nationals. Tony Burke, who is the leader of the House, not just, of course, the Minister responsible for Home Affairs and the shambles that are things like immigration. But he is in part in charge of who sits where. And he says today that it never occurred to him that when Barnaby Joyce went to join the crossbench, the entire National Party would move to the crossbench with him. The crossbench is now as big as the opposition. We're working out what that'll mean. It is a big shift. What this means, of course, is that there is going to be a significant number of changes also behind the scenes. You see, already because of their reduced number after the election, the number of staff that the opposition had to put together its alternative government policies, well, that had already been shaved. Now, if the size of the opposition goes down to just 28 MPs and the collective everyone else is also 28, well, then the staff is going to move around as well. So all of this means one of the consequences of the coalition breaking up is their capacity to even come up with the ideas to be able to take on a government, let alone to hold them to account. Well, it has effectively been halved. It makes things even easier for a terrible government that, despite all of the things that I just mentioned, including an interest rate rise happening 1 year after the interest rate cut that helped them get returned as the government, well, they get to say this and it's enough to feed a news cycle.
Well, it's going to be a shambles on the other side of the Parliament. That's the only thing that you can be sure of. There's a small opposition now of barely 28 members, and that is split right down the middle between Sussan Ley's supporters and Angus Taylor's supporters.
So it's going to be tough. But there's some good news if, like me, you have been keeping an eye on One Nation for a long time. They have just hit their highest number ever in any poll. And it is a very serious poll for them to be topping the charts at. According to Philip Coury, writing about the primary vote, as you can see there, the best they were getting out of some polls was 25%, up it by 1 to 26. Just over a quarter of the electorate. The Liberal Party way down at 19. The Greens at 11, others, National Party down to 2. So the Labor Party is basically where it was at the election, but certainly down from the highs where it was towards the back half of last year. One Nation, absolutely surging. And don't forget, it's not about the lower house. That would result in at least one senator coming from every single state in the country. That's huge news. To give you an idea about who is making up this vote, well, you can see here that by generations, you can see Generation Z, that's the youngest of voters, about 18 to 30, 30 to 45 are millennials, 45 to 60s Gen X, and baby boomers are at 35. To take you through this a little cleaner, Labor has the largest number of voters in the youngest group. Labor lead the Greens for the biggest group in millennials. That's 33% to 17%. In fact, sorry, my apologies. One Nation is even outpolling the Greens with millennials, 18%, blimey. One Nation leading Labor in the fight for people my age, 45 to 55, right in there with Generation X. They've had enough, haven't they? And the Liberal Party is now running third in the group that they have always been able to count upon, and that's people over the age of 55. In fact, in the over 55s, it is 35 Labor, 35 One Nation, 21 for the coalition. Extraordinary things that we are starting to see. Oh, by the way, my mate, Cos Samaras, he's the one who did this poll. We'll have a chat to him in the next couple of days about the behind the scenes of all of this. He did the Redbridge poll. They were the ones right up there with YouGov who were right on top of the result last year. They also saw how the Libs flitted away the lead that they had at the start of last year. Cos on Twitter tonight is explaining part of his insights into this particular poll. Well, he says people who are the tradies, the former Howard battlers, well, guess where they're going? Off to One Nation. Between them, 47% of people who have trade or TAFE qualifications, but now the split is almost 2 to 1 in favour of One Nation. Now, as Cos also says, this is not One Nation leading, this is One Nation surging. I don't think that this is a scenario of One Nation, protest vote. I think this is a legitimate revolution happening before our eyes. As for the issues, again, I'll show you the big complicated one and I'll make it nice and easy for you. Again, cost of living, healthcare, housing affordability, the rate of immigration, climate change and national security. In terms of which party leads on each of those, well, Labor has the largest vote of those that are worried about cost of living, don't know why. Labor has the largest when it comes to housing. One Nation, unsurprisingly, massive, 34% compared to 17% for the Libs on migration, 16% for Labor. Greens most worried about climate change, but overall that number is falling way down from where it was a couple of elections ago. And the only thing the Liberals are winning on is national security. The most popular leader of any political party in the country is Pauline Hanson. Again, inside these pieces of information released by Redbridge, printed in the Australian Financial Review, have a look at this. 38% of people have a favourable view of Pauline Hanson, 41% unfavourable. That is a higher ranking than the Prime Minister at 34-44. Barnaby Joyce has a higher number than Sussan Ley, Andrew Hastie, David Littleproud, or even Donald Trump. But for those who have been agitating for a change in leadership of the Liberal Party, pay attention here. Andrew Hastie, 16% positive, 16% negative, 68% no idea. Angus Taylor, 13% positive, 70% no idea. David Littleproud, 13% yes, 27% negative, 60% no idea. Unsurprisingly, all of this, a story that gets better by the day for One Nation, all of its organisation, all of its candidates, and it's only Lower House MP, the former Deputy Prime Minister, who spoke with Danica just a couple of hours ago here on Sky News.
She's the most authentic, and that's because people understand that she's lived life where she's been in small business. That's because they understand we're dealing with a person who's so tough. People understand that what Pauline has said in the past and she was ridiculed for has now come out to be the truth. And people want Australia to be strong. They want it to be unified. They want strength, clarity, unity. And they see Pauline and One Nation delivering that.
How good is the Sunday night on Sky News? Danica into James into Murray. Looking forward to that as our lineup for 2026. Make sure you're here on a Sunday night. So much action. So much first bite. I guarantee that the media, of course, tomorrow talk about the poll that you know about tonight. That's why you've always got to be here on a Sunday night. So, Andrew Hastie, Friday, decided to pull the pin. He will not be contesting the Liberal leadership. Put simply, he has received honest feedback from his colleagues, according to his own statement on Instagram, and pretty obviously a majority of them don't want to make a change to him as the leader now. So that puts us in a scenario where presumably someone who's not Sussan Ley candidate becomes Angus Taylor. Now, Angus Taylor would be feeling pretty confident because when the leadership ballot was held last time, and basically it was a 50-50 result, three of the people who voted for Sussan Ley, two of whom have left the parliament, in Linda Reynolds and Holly Hughes. One never made it into the parliament, being Giselle Kapterian, who, of course, lost the seat of Bradfield by, 23 votes? So presumably that would mean that the centre-right and the right have the numbers to make a change. Trying to work out whom would be their challenger has been the challenge for the past few weeks, and the expectations are that nothing happens tomorrow at the start of the parliamentary session. In fact, quite correctly, the Deputy Leader is saying to the Shadow Defence Minister, now's the time. Do it or get off the pot. Do it or get in line. If you're going to not get in line, then get to the back of the bus.
The convention is if one does not support the leader, they step aside. Angus hasn't done that, so my running assumption is he continues to support Sussan Ley in her leadership.
Now, of course, they're all going to say that until they have the dinners, have the conversations, have the quiet WhatsApps, have the separate conversations on Signal, and then they can work out, with just 28 members in the lower house, several up into the Senate, we are talking about not that many people that need to all be on one side of the list. Now, the reality for Sussan Ley and her best case to suggest that she deserves to get through this next period of Parliament is that she has done what she had to do when it came to those Nationals shadow ministers. When they decided to vote against the shadow cabinet, they couldn't be in the shadow cabinet. It was her decision to say that those were unnecessary resignations, as well as the rest of the National Party. She has not named an alternative opposition lineup because she has left the door open to the Nationals coming to their senses and finding a way back in. She also deserves the opportunity to be able to get clear air, but she's never had that for multiple months. Why? Because rather than the proper root and branch conversation that needed to happen post-election, we were straight off into a conversation about whether net zero was the policy that needed to be kept or dumped. It was the Nationals that largely led that process, and in order to keep them inside the tent, well, we know where the Liberal Party ended up being. So the Liberal Party ends up getting caught in a position where they're going to be too left-wing for the people who've run off to One Nation, and they're too right-wing for the people who have ended up voting teal. That becomes a very difficult place to be. And that's why you need as many people as possible, including, if there is an opportunity for the Liberal Party to form its own full shadow cabinet with shadow ministers, there needs to be an everything is forgiven position. This is where, in the potential exclusive Liberal shadow ministry, you need to have all of the big players, including some of the key players that are in the Senate, inside the tent. They need to be inside the shadow ministry. They need to be on the front lines. I'm talking about Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who'll be our guest tomorrow night on the program. She must be front and centre. I'm also looking forward to seeing an opportunity here that if there is this permanent split between the Liberals and the Nationals, well, then there's the opportunity for Jane Hume, who has enjoyed her time on the backbench, to be freewheeling, but to get back on the page. The same with Sarah Henderson and multiple others. The reality is, if the Libs are going to stand any chance of being in any fight at any time, they have to have all of their best players on the park. Now, when it comes to both the Liberal Party and to a lesser extent the National Party, so many of their stars are in the Senate. But they can still do plenty of interviews and do plenty of things when they stand on their own 2 feet. As for what the National Party does, my view is if they've decided to break up, well, then they need to enjoy their time alone. Not as punishment, but to see how they go. But the reality is that the next 2 weeks are going to be tough. Why? Because there's going to be more polling that's going to be similar to the polling that we've looked at over the past few weeks. The Prime Minister will, of course, bat away any and every question because, with a split in the coalition, the number of questions that are coming from the coalition instantly halves. Meaning, if between now and the next 2 weeks a scandal like an Annika Wells scenario was going to get up, rather than having the opportunity to ask 2, 3, 4 questions, they're only going to get 2 and hope that the National Party follow up. That most likely is not going to happen. So wait, watch and see. We'll see what happens in the next little while. Again, not my choice. It is going to be the choice of Liberal Party MPs, of which, structurally, right now, the centre-right and the right would be very close to being in a position to take the leadership, but whether they should becomes a whole different question. With one exception, and one exception only, that of Malcolm Turnbull. I've always thought that a leader deserves the right, post-election, to be able to serve as long as they possibly can up until the next election. The darkest and hardest days of opposition are immediately following an election. The work of, in my view, the Liberal and National Party is to work on the machine, to work on how they pick the candidates and to pick the candidates within the 12 months following an election. To be serious about their reviews, to hit the road and find out why people who voted for them in 19 and 22 didn't vote for them in 25. To get in touch with meeting people where they are, and by that I don't mean turning soft left, I mean upping a serious social media game. They need to embrace change because they are going to be eaten from the left and eaten from the right. And One Nation deserves its moment in the sun, not because it is a protest party, but because it is a movement led by a woman who has had a straight arrow view and a real life for 30 years. Compare the pair. Think about Pauline Hanson's life over the past 30 years, in and out of the parliament, in and out of jail, on and off Dancing with the Stars. And a whole lot more, including, of course, small business and being able to reform and turn a political party from one that, in terms of representation, had 0 in the parliament to now 4 people in the Senate, with a likelihood on these polling numbers of being able to have a senator in every single state. As for the Libs, well, all wait, watch and see. For those of us 5 million people who voted for something other than the government to be the government, we want someone other than the government to step up to take the fight to a very bad government. But it is a 2-week period, so will we be saying the same thing at the end of the week? Who knows? The end of the session will be 2 weeks and the killing season would be that Thursday, to avoid the opportunity to go in the parliament and have their nose rubbed in it by the Prime Minister, who is going to be at the absolute top of his arrogance. Also, a little more here when it comes to Pauline is that the stronger One Nation gets, and tonight their highest number ever, 26% in a poll, means, while they are now in front of the coalition, multiple opinion polls have confirmed that is now to be the case. People start to ask questions like, is Barnaby Joyce going to be One Nation's first Prime Minister? Now, this matters and really matters. And it is a potential problem for One Nation. I've spoken about it before. Their expectation should not be lower house. It should be about the upper house. Why? Because preferences make things difficult downstairs. But Barnaby Joyce has already told us he's running for the Senate. So unless he's about to change his mind, go round again in New England, well, then they would be looking for an entirely clean and brand new team, and that becomes difficult. So whether Barnaby changes his mind and stays downstairs, we'll all find out and all find out together. But Barnaby Joyce, doing the high-stakes interview in the Daily Telegraph and Sunday Telegraph this weekend, was asked in and around this question, and he said, I'm standing for the Senate in New South Wales, and that was it. I don't want to get the hairs running. But quite obviously, all the time people are now going around saying, are you now a member of this party? What's best for this party? You have to consider what is put before you. So, slight door being left open, does he stay in the lower house? Any discussions other than that haven't been had. If they had down the track, I don't want to get caught in a lie down the track. If there's a discussion that's had down the track, it will be had down the track, but it hasn't been had. So, what about the prospect of, say, Prime Minister Joyce? Never dismiss anything, Barnaby says. If someone had said that Nigel Farage, you'll never be Prime Minister of England 10 years ago, well, wouldn't they look like a fool now? So, what does that mean for Barnaby? We'll all have to wait. It's not going to be a tomorrow decision. There's still a couple of years before you start to get into the formal running in and around having candidates. But my expectation is that One Nation wants to get candidates in the field as soon as possible, so they've got a couple of years to hit the pavement between now and the next federal election, something the Liberal and National Party should also be doing, not doing it at 5 minutes to midnight, not being ravened by the factions of the left and right, of the supposed centre-right of Australian politics. But here come the hit jobs. As One Nation gets more popular, the establishment is going to come, and this is just the beginning of what we know is going to be 2.5 years of thump, 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 thump. The Guardian, unsurprisingly, begins the chants. At least the ABC, in its criticism, is trying to hide it behind the phenomena that is obvious. Number one issue, Gen X blokes, Gen X overall, backing in One Nation. And there's a whole bunch of musicians who don't want their music associated in any way, shape or form with One Nation, which of course happened to Trump, and that really stopped him politically, didn't it? Speaking of the music, the Holly Valance song, which is in the middle of a super progressive movie, which I saw the other day, it's very funny. There's a couple of scenes where I thought, whew, how is this not what everyone's outraged by? I won't tell you what they are. You can go and see it for yourself at superprogressivemovie.com, or if it's lucky enough to be seen at a cinema near you, go and see it. Go and see it and back them in. Well, of course, Holly Valance made her appearance on Sky News today with The Outsiders to explain why she was backing in Pauline, and the song was such an important part of doing that.
Do you realise how bad this is, what it actually means that they would take this down? Because there's nothing particularly violent or horrific about it. I'm not really swearing. I'm not, endorsing rape and drug dealing and anything that's sort of horrific. And all those kinds of songs still happily still sitting there on iTunes.
Yeah, good point, because, of course, remember, the song which was in the movie got yanked because iTunes decided to not include it in the charts. It has been returned principally thanks to my dear friends Kyle and Jackie O. They also spoke with Holly Valance and Pauline Hanson last week on their #1 show.
R. Kelly, all his songs are up there, even though he's a violent, woman-abusing offender. No problem. Diddy's songs still up there, no problem. What iTunes seem to have an issue with is political satire humour. Oh, that's not allowed over at iTunes. I believe that's a little bit too woke for any of us. If you don't like that sort of stuff, that's fine. Don't buy it. Don't go on iTunes and buy it. But don't tell us what we can and can't listen to.
Right on, Kyle. Love you, brother. The most listened to radio show in the country. Why? Because it stands up at moments like this. So it's back in the charts, Pauline Hanson knowing that Kyle and Jackie O were the reason, so she gave a thank you back.
Well, it's back on the charts again. Kiss, kiss my ass, bone Holly Valance. And you know, credit's got to go to Kyle and Jackie O. They got it back on. So Kyle and Jackie, thank you.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Don't forget intern Pete, of course. He did a little internship for a week in Canberra with Pauline. We love you, Pete. We love you, Kyle. We love you, Jackie O. Now, the madness in the United States, and the madness particularly in Minnesota, you've seen this play out for the past few weeks. Now, one of the reasons why things are particularly crazy there is because the government in Minnesota, the government in Minneapolis, their capital city, is refusing to allow people from the Immigration Department access to illegal immigrants who are in jail. They are saying, despite the fact that these people are either accused or guilty of a crime, we will not facilitate any attempt to deport them from the country. Seriously? Well, get ready, because there's going to be another city that wants to have exactly the same fight, hoping to get pretty much the same resolution. Hopefully, not with the overreach and deaths as we have seen over the past couple of weeks. It is New York City, the capital of the Western world, the city that never sleeps. Yeah. So, how's this? New York City has banned immigration and customs enforcement from being able to go to the prisons. To do what? To pick up the people that are illegal immigrants in jail for committing crimes. Watch this space, because there'll be, I think, a doozy in the next few days out of New York City. As always, we like to show you at this time how showbiz for ugly people works. And I'm not just talking about myself. I have seen a mirror. I am talking about politicians. We pay them not just to write the laws we have to live under, but we pay the staff to make crappy social media videos like this for Blackout Boy.
Morning, everyone, from me and Kobe and Ollie. There we are. Good boys. Just a quick update this morning on a new report out from AEMO, our independent market operator, which shows that renewables hit record rates in the last 3 months.
Sun's out, guns out. Monique Ryan. Well, she, of course, is also in this. Remember, of course, she's the person who, at one point in a dispute with her staffer, we learnt in court, believed she could be Prime Minister one day. So we always have to keep an eye on her.
Firstly, medical research saves lives.
The Medical Research Future Fund. The Medical Research Future Fund.
That was started by Joe Hockey. Did you support the Abbott budget way back then, Dr. Ryan? Of course not. You're just trying to pretend that it's your own idea, but nothing to see here. And then there's, of course, the first-term Labor MP from Queensland who gives definition to put the phone down. Oh, don't you like the play school romper room face? Ha ha! You know, woo!